Hey, well, welcome to The Family Business. This is the podcast where we talk about the intertwining of family and careers. My name is Matt Kaufman, and I am fortunate enough to be joined by two folks that I admire, Ellias and Motty Klots. You guys say hello.
Hello.
Hey.
They would love to let the audience get to know you guys just a bit. So if you can give me just a quick 30 seconds to a minute to say either what you're doing now or touch on your career, and then we can get into some of the exciting parts of your life. But I'm curious about some of the things that you're doing currently.
Okay, I'll start. So I'm Katie. I am currently the managing director of the JDRF T1D Fund. We're a venture philanthropy fund that is the venture arm of the nonprofit foundation JDRF, which focuses on translational research, grants, and now for us, venture investments into therapies and treatments for people with type 1 diabetes. So I've been managing that for about 2 years now, a little more than 2 years, and it's great.
Yeah, that's
so
massive.
I had kind of spent my career in medtech, both in kind of larger companies like Medtronic and Stryker, and most recently a startup called Cardiologs, more of a digital health company, kind of between the US and Europe. I've actually left last week, so I'm looking at entrepreneurial venture now as we speak.
Yeah, don't let these folks fool you. They're some of the sharper, more successful people in medical device, and the contributions they've made are substantial. So I'm lucky to have them. So first thing, to start with the important stuff, they recently had their fourth child. So let's do a giant congratulations there. How is the house coming along?
Very good. So baby Josephine is a little over 2 months old now and is currently being babysat by her big 3 siblings in the form of watching a movie and hoping she doesn't bother them. So we'll see how that goes. But she's a good one. We like her so far. And, you know, big brother and 2 big sisters are both adjusting well to the new world order, and we're doing our best too.
She doesn't get in their way yet. So for right now, everything's good.
Are they showing her their judo moves yet?
Oh,
Yeah.
thankfully, yeah, unfortunately, but only one time, and we had to put a stop to that.
Yeah, I had a feeling that was coming. That's just the nature of the beast. All of a sudden, she becomes the practiced person for them. So I'm always curious, when you have a range of ages, from a work standpoint, how much does it change having an infant versus, let's say, Teo's 8? So,
yeah.
I mean, how different is that from a time management standpoint for you guys, work-wise and juggling everything, versus a kid you can put down for a nap versus one you have to put down to watch television for a half an hour?
Yeah, I mean, we've both been working full-time throughout all of our kids being born and growing up till now. So I think, you know, it's just always a game of like, what's working this week? So, you know, clearly different types of expectations and, you know, interaction expected from different kids. There was like a brief moment in time when I think we had only 2 kids and they were both napping at exactly the same time. And that gave us one type of flexibility. And then on the other hand, now, you know, no one was taking a nap. And so now getting back to, you know, a situation where the baby has to actually go to sleep at some point. We can't just drag her around everywhere, although we mostly do, is just going kind of back to the future a little bit.
Although the last 2 months have also been a little bit strange because it's been, you know, lockdown. We're both at home. We do get some help. I'm sure we'll talk more about that, but we get lots of help to do what we do. But in a way, it hasn't been that disruptive yet. I'm sure that once, hopefully, things get back to more normal.
No streaking kids through a Zoom call? You haven't had to deal with that?
Oh, I would I would say shrieking more than streaking, but that's just sort of, I think the good news is that right now, since everybody is work from home, you know, there's a lot more understanding of that on all fronts. So like when your 4-year-old comes up to ask you a question during your video conference call, which I can't guarantee won't happen in the next half hour. You know, people are very understanding because they've got their own ones doing the same thing, right? So I think that actually, you know, if we think back to that BBC clip of the father trying to like shut his kids, you know, we've all lived that now in some form, and we've taken, you know, humility from that. And, you know, the key lesson is just to be gracious when your child interrupts you, which
it's
even
funny,
if you don't want to.
When my son was younger, he's 13 now, but when he was younger, I would just put him on the headset. You know, instead of fighting it and trying to be super civilized. I'm like, Spencer, hop on. And he would say, who is this? And it's somebody in Paris or somebody, in San Francisco. And he would just chat with them. And it totally breaks the spell of, I don't know how to behave here. How should I react? Because I think kids just kind of humanize you. It's just the nature of what they do. They're just, there's no pretense with them. They just want to know who you are, and then they're gone. Because they really don't care, I don't think, who that is. So between the two of you and all the travel that you do, because of all the years I've known you, you guys just seem to be, on a plane more than you're off of it. How does it come about that you set up schedules? Like, how far in advance do you start mapping out conferences and meetings? And how do you juggle all of that from being physically not there?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because it's obviously evolved as the complexity in our personal life evolves with more and more people to take care of. But we used to have these friends from business school who would kind of joke about between us because they would have quarterly meetings to talk about their relationship. We now have
quarterly meetings.
Yeah, we don't, but we have for sure quarterly discussions about our long-term schedule and calendars. But I would say the amount of times it comes up in personal conversation, like where Motty's like, we really need to sit down and do calendars tonight. I'm like, this is probably a weekly to monthly occurrence, and then obviously little adjustments as we go. But, big conferences that you know about a year in advance are on the books, and we know about them, and things that kind of come up more regularly. I mean, we probably have a half an hour to 45-minute discussion at least once every couple of weeks. Yeah.
I mean, I think we've been fortunate in that we work jobs that, to a large extent, give us flexibility about when we travel and when we schedule meetings, right? So it's typically us scheduling the meetings for our team. So with the exception of kind of big conferences and bigger events or offsites or things that really we get to have an input on. And we do try not to travel at the same time, right? So we literally block out days on each other's calendar. They're non-travel days. And that works, I'd say most of the time, except maybe a couple of times a year.
Yeah. So what happens when you both have something that you can't miss? Do you stand there and stare at each other like two cowboys with your hands on your phones and draw? And you try to figure out, like, how do we work this out? Because you have to go and I have to go. And then you look over and you've got four faces just staring at you. Like, Motty, are you the one who backs down, or how do you guys work that out?
We typically fly a relative from wherever they happen to live to wherever we happen to live to take over. So we have childcare. So we have, when we lived in Paris, we had a wonderful nanny who could definitely stay over for a couple of nights. So that did come up occasionally. And when we needed additional backup, we'd fly, my mother out from California or your mother from Boston. And
yeah, it's a lot easier now that we're in the U.S. So we've been back in the States now a little more than a year, and my family is from around here in Boston. We haven't really had to call on them too much to do overnights, but we then made the decision that we would go for having an au pair this year. We can get back to that later, but that actually helped us a lot in cases where if Motty was away on like a week to Europe and I had to do an overnight in New York, we at least have somebody who lives in our house anyway who can cover. And then if it's more than one day, then, my mom will come in from 45 minutes away because she can come and help out for after school and stuff like that.
Do you have that Seinfeld speed dial thing where they're in order of what you need or what you want, or is it random, you pick it out of a hat, who gets a turn to watch the kids?
Well, I mean, it's not that complicated in the sense that my mom is my mom and she lives about 45 minutes away. Okay. And, so she's probably like first point of call if there's a relative instead of like our au pair or nanny. If that doesn't work for her, the second point of call is my dad and my stepmom, but that means the kids have to go to their house. Like they don't come to our house. So that's sort of the next there because the house we live in is actually... Exactly. And then, we have yet to have to fly anyone into Boston since we've got enough layers of backup here. But we also employ two full-time people to help us between an au pair and a nanny.
I'm surprised two's enough. So with all the travel that you guys, what's that, Motty?
I said we are too sometimes.
Yeah, I know. Now, with all the travel that's gone on, I'm sure there's a couple of stories or situations of you doing the planes, trains, automobiles to get back in time for somebody's something event. Do you have one?
Yeah.
I have one when we were living in Paris when I was traveling. I think I was in Armenia meeting a distributor, and we had, that was one of those weeks when both Katie and I were traveling, and we had our nanny that I think was sick, and we needed somebody to stay. So she recommended a friend of hers. And we have one of those cameras, like a baby monitor. And I decided that.
By the way, we're not people who have like those cameras all over the house. It's like literally just in the kids' bedroom, so you can see if they're asleep.
It's not inside the teddy bear.
It's not. No, it's a camera. The nanny knows it's there. Yeah, so we're not crazy nanny cam people. We just have one baby monitor.
It's a good disclaimer.
Yeah.
But I was. I think I like heard some noise in the bedroom at some odd hour, and like I checked because it was available on my phone, and then I saw like the replacement nanny like yelling at Theo, who was, I don't know, like 15 months, right? And he is sitting there just really confused because, you know, he's just playing, and he, you know, she had a bad day or whatever it was, and I said, look, I'm not comfortable with that, so I took the next flight out and came back a couple of days early and relieved her, and that was probably the most extreme. And then, you know, there's like delayed flights.
Yeah, I mean, I think this year, even, or in the last 12 months, I had to do a board meeting in San Diego, and I ended up doing like a very, very quick trip to the West Coast so that I could make it back in time, or no, vice versa. I wanted to stay for my kids' like Christmas concert for, you know, kindergarten or first grade or whatever it was, and it was a snowstorm in Boston, and I was like, am I going to be able to get out? But I basically like took my suitcase to the concert, listened to his last song, and then got in an Uber to get to the airport to take off to go to California to be able to make it in time for the board dinner that night. And, you know, caught it by being only 30 minutes late for the board dinner, but it was, you know, worth it to see him sing this song he'd been practicing for.
Absolutely. They want to look out and see your face. I mean, I can't tell you, my daughter is not a good athlete, and somehow I signed her up for softball, and she got one hit, and it was the day that my wife had to travel, and she missed the one game. And she's like, are you kidding? I missed the one game? But I did the cool husband move. I got video of it, so I retained my marriage. But yeah, I mean, there's no winning with this stuff. But do you guys try to square away time for vacation mixed in on these trips? Like, how do you work that on the front end, back end, or do you just separate the two and say, look, this is business travel, this is family travel?
It's more the latter.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was a little different when we were living in Europe because there were more, let's say, cool family weekend trip travel destinations.
An option.
Yeah, so like sometimes if Motty, you know, had a retreat, I think in Lisbon for a week for work, you know, I flew the kids out and we spent the long weekend there. So not for like a full-on vacation, but for just a little bit of a family getaway. We've done that sometimes. And again, the destinations when we were living in Paris were maybe a little bit more vacation friendly. Like I have a board in Cleveland, nothing against the company in Cleveland, but that doesn't seem like as conducive to family vacationing.
From Cleveland, Katie.
Hey, power to you.
We're going to have to go to a commercial.
You know.
Well, you had told me something a long time ago, and I thought that this was interesting move to do, and I tried this in my family, is that you try to do mini trips with just one kid at a time, or one parent and one kid at a time, as opposed to all six of you going somewhere. Am I right in remembering that?
Yeah, no, we've definitely done that a few times. You know, it's something that we actually thought consciously about also when we knew we were going to have a fourth kid and realized like that's, you know, you're already outmanned. Now we're like double outmanned. So how do you try to make sure that each kid gets enough one-on-one time with a parent? And already with 3 kids, we were seeing the effects of that, right? Especially for middle child, which is, you know, textbook psychology stuff, but making sure that you carve out time that makes each of them feel like they get their special time, maybe not necessarily with both parents at the same time, although great if you have grandparents and others who can help you do that too. But that was advice that we got from friends with 3+ kids is, you know, the way to really help them feel like they have a place in the family is to carve out that time. And it doesn't necessarily have to be getting on an airplane, although in some cases it was. Like Motty, I think you took Theo to Istanbul for a weekend. Yeah. And your parents were there, and I stayed home with the 2 girls. In other times, it's just like going for a bike ride with only one of them, or I think I took Ellie to a ballet at the Boston Ballet to see the, you know, Cinderella ballet or something, and she loved that. It was so such a treat. So some of those types of things, just to make them feel like they're not just kind of a rounding error on the family dynamic time.
Well, I think also as they are more and more different in age, right? So Theo is 8 and we have a baby, right? It's not practical for you to do an activity where everybody's happy, right? So you inherently have to separate, and we try to make it a point to make it a little more special.
Those are always challenging, like the Disney trips where one kid can go on the ride and 2 can't, and of course the older one lords it over the other 2. You guys can't go? Oh, you can't go? I can go. And there's a lot of that. It happens in my family. Now that my son's old enough, but my daughter used to make sure he knew it. Now, switching gears like to your careers, I mean, I've known you guys for a while, so I've known some of the different choices that you've made. All of them have been, substantially successful in several different ways. But I bet there are jobs that you didn't take, either because of family, because of timing, or just because it wasn't the right place for you. And I'm curious if there was anything that you decided not to do just because either family or the job wasn't what you wanted to do, or the company wasn't what you expected. But I'm curious if the family ever came into that decision.
Yeah, I mean, very much so, in the sense that, even when we were without kids, we've always, Motty and I have been very lucky in all of our career steps since we've met, and we've had a lot of them. We've always been able to kind of figure out a balance, which enables both of us to have a good career setup, even if the other one is taking a role that causes us to move. And so, then adding kids into the mix just sort of adds the complexity to that. But for example, I mean, it's a little bit of twist on your question. When I took my current role, we were still in France, and I was able to essentially work it out with my team at the fund that I would work remotely from Paris for the first 8 months for family reasons. And so I would travel to the US about once a month to be in person with my team. They knew I was coming eventually, so I was using that time to make the most of making good connections in Europe for the role that I'm doing now. But, I basically said, hey, listen, I've got 3 kids in school. We're in the middle of finishing our French nationality process, and we've got, we've been working on that for 6 years. So we really need to not come right now. And while that's going to be a little bit complex for the team to get rallied around, it's what I need to do as a family to take this job. And so we kind of had to present that up front. So that ended up being, a way in which the family very much was factored into whether or not I was going to take that job in the first place, was how accommodating they could manage to be with what they needed from me.
And from my side, I was working at a startup where, so I'd actually just joined a startup in Paris, and the US was our main market. And there was always, from a very initial time that I joined, a discussion about how we're going to get coverage in the US market, how we're going to build a presence, who from the company should move there and how we would set it up. And then when Katie's job materialized, then I came to the company and said, look, why don't we work towards me moving to Boston to set up the U.S. office in Boston, and we were at the section of health and tech, so Boston is a great place to be, and it kind of made sense from a company perspective, and it worked out personally very well for us, and honestly for the company as well, because now we have a foundation in the team and great traction in the market.
But I mean, I think at the same time, like there was a time when I was looking at kind of a next opportunity when I was leaving Sofinnova in Paris, and one of the opportunities that came up was something in another European country with a language that we don't speak and isn't French, because we do speak French now. And I had just found out that I was pregnant with our 3rd child. And basically I said to them, hey, this role sounds really exciting and really interesting. And by the way, if we'd been single, we probably would have been fine with moving to this city and it would have been a fun adventure. But I was like, look, I can't really get my head around coming to work for you and then going on maternity leave a few months later. And by the way, this country happened to have like a very long maternity leave baseline. So it's like, it wouldn't have been fair to them to come work for a few months and then be off for a year or so. And at the same time, we kind of couldn't get our head around, well, our kids are already learning additional languages. Like, let's stick with French or double down on one of the other ones, English or Russian, that they also already speak, as opposed to adding a 4th language into the mix like right now. So we did end up turning down that opportunity for largely family reasons, because it was a great opportunity.
What does your family think you do? Because you guys both have complex jobs. Like, how do you explain it either to your parents or your siblings or your kids? Or do you not even bother and just say, I go to work, and you leave it at that?
So a lot of my family, so my parents, my siblings, they're on the tech side, right? So they understand the tech angle of what, so they're out in Northern California. And my brother used to work at Facebook. My father works at Oracle. My sister works at various tech startups. For them, it kind of makes sense with a caveat that they don't really understand the healthcare side of things. Like, we are obviously all consumers of healthcare. They understand it's a complex industry. They understand technology applies to it, and they're intellectually interested in what I do. But I think the day-to-day and the nuance of it, because at the end of the day, it is a complex industry, and there's a lot of innovation, and there's all of these different players and different incentives and all of the things that we know and love, and why some of us are in this industry. It's not really accessible to them. So it's good dinner time conversation.
Over after a while, they just kind of drift. Yeah.
It never gets to that point. My sister in particular is very good at changing the discussion topics.
No, I will say though, Motty's dad first of all, the whole family is very smart, so that makes it easy to talk about things on a kind of a concrete basis, case by case. But like more recently, your dad and I have discussions around particular medtech stocks or startups or things, companies that we're familiar with and wants to understand, are they good investments and things like that. So I think from that standpoint, there's an interest and an appetite to learn more about what we're doing, even if day to day they don't exactly understand what we do with our lives, which is fine. I mean, it's kind of funny on our side, right? So we've both been in medtech for a long time, and now I also do biotech investing as well. But when I explain to the kids what we do, that's kind of a harder conversation. Like, my family has a lot of doctors, so contrary to Motty's family, the medical healthcare angle they get. They don't really understand the finance angle, although my mom's an MBA, so she gets that. But like the kids is another story. And so, explaining to the kids that we're not doctors, even though we do a lot of doctor related stuff and we see a lot of doctors and we talk to a lot of doctors. So, I explained to Teo, who's 8, that I work in a foundation that's trying to help people come up with new medicines for people with type 1 diabetes, and that's something that even children can get, and it's very hard for them. And so we're trying to come up with a cure or treatments. And so every day when I come home from work for like a month or so, and now it's less often, but for a while there, he'd be like, "So have you cured it yet? Like, have you guys figured this out?" I'm like, "No, honey, it's like not really like that. It's going to take a little longer." But I mean, he like got it enough to know that he's like, "Well, you're helping doctors do that, right? So like, what's up? Why is it taking so long?" So it was pretty humorous.
It's funny. My brother just called me yesterday. I've been doing this for 20 years. And he called me and he goes, "What do you do again?" I said, "Are you serious?" I mean, he's a brilliant attorney, and he was trying to connect me with somebody he thought I could help. And I'm like, "I seriously have to tell you again what I do?" He goes, "Well, I'm not really sure who you place. Doctors, right?" I'm like, "No, I don't place doctors." And it's just, and that's been going on since I've been here. So I've run out of explanations. I'm going to start telling them I'm a shepherd after this and just be done with it. So with that, and they're home now and they're watching you guys work, and you're setting an example for them because they're seeing like how often you're on your computers and on your phones, and they're seeing it every day. I imagine there's some push and pull on that. Hey, I want to be on video games or my iPad or my phone as often. Do you guys keep track of your time at all, or do you explain to them, "Hey, look, this is for working. I need to do this. This is not a game for me," or how do you explain that to yours?
Well, it's a really tough balance, right? Because you want to make sure, and I read an article a few years ago that really resonated with me. It's not, I think, a good idea or setting a good example for your kids to say, like, I have to go to work, because you want to communicate to them that you enjoy your work, not that it's something that's a chore that you have to do. So how do you say, "Yeah, but yes, I have to work right now, but I really like my job, and I feel like I'm doing important things for not just myself, but for other people. And that's also what allows us to have our life, but like that you enjoy your work and not just that it's something you're doing instead of hanging out with them." Because that could kind of communicate maybe the wrong signals around work and career and things like that. But, with that said, certainly like our our 6-year-old, our kindergartner, said to us this year, when they saw how often this spring of the COVID spring we were on screens, they said, well, how come you get so much screen time and you never let us have that much screen time? We're like, well, it's not exactly the same thing, but we do try to keep pretty consistent business hours, even during these strange times, in the sense that, and we're kind of forced to, because we have childcare that helps us out during specific hours. So like there are hours where mama and papa are working, and like you're not supposed to disturb us then. And then, we'll come down for lunch, or we'll come down for a snack or whatever, and be done with the end of the day. And they'll say, oh, are you done now? Can you hang out with us? And we'll say yes. But like I did try and fail to put like a sign on the door, which was our makeshift office during this COVID situation, because we don't really have a home office, that said, Mama is working. And at least 2 of my 3 kids can read that. And they thought that was really funny, and then put it on their own door, and completely didn't work at all. So.
Is that right? Yeah, when my son was 4. What's that?
I was going to say, I have actually, so when they come and say, oh, how come you're on the screen? And I'm like, okay, well, come, you can be on the screen with me if it's appropriate. So you can join my conference call, or you can look at my Excel model. And that lasts about 2 minutes, because,
I was going to say,
it's not as exciting as it looks. So.
Yeah, I used to have a signal with my son, and I said, you make up the signal, whatever you want it to be. So he was 4 years old. So he just said, you hold up 4 fingers, and lets me know that you're helping somebody find a job, and you're doing something that you need to pay attention to. So even to this day, he'll walk in and he'll put up 4 fingers, and I just nod my head, and he knows that he's got to get. He also leaves the dog there, and they'll just to mess with me. So I've got this giant dog jumping around as I'm trying to work, and him giggling as he closes the door. But that's my house. When you guys travel around the world and you interact with different funds and different corporations, does family become a common denominator? Or is it something that's funny? It's just in my head, where I think I talk family with almost every person I speak to. But do you guys find that it happens that way as well? Do you guys connect over other people that have families similar to yours in age?
Well, not even necessarily close in age, but I think it humanizes you in a way that other things do not, right? So you immediately have this connection with people who are also parents, and if their kids are older, which tends to be the case, then you can discuss about what advice they might have, or how they manage different family situations, or I think it's a great equalizer.
Yeah, and I would say it's very interesting to reflect on that question now, being a parent, and from the time, because we both had careers before becoming parents. We were, like a lot of people these days, we didn't have kids until our, early mid-30s. And I think, for me personally, it was really advantageous from a career standpoint to become a mom, because I tend to be very formal when I give presentations and things like that, and sort of in my current life now as an investor, almost everyone I've ever interacted with since I've become a VC has seen me pregnant at some point or another, because I was pregnant a lot of the last decade. And that, you don't even have to say anything, and all of a sudden somebody's got something to say to you about the fact that you have this kiddo growing. And so I think for me, that's actually really, as Motty said, humanized me and made me much more approachable, because there's sort of always an icebreaker in that context. Particularly in Europe, where conversations about like kids and pregnancy and even weight gain are like less taboo than they are in the U.S. But I feel like, everybody who met me, if they met me when I was pregnant and then they saw me when I wasn't, they would have something to ask me, and vice versa. If they met me when I wasn't and then they saw I was, they had something to ask me. So I actually feel like that's helped being a social lubricant in that way. Although I did have a meeting this fall, and I won't call out the company, obviously, where it was a European company coming to pitch. And I was, visibly pregnant at the time, although I would say I wasn't like 8 months pregnant. I was a little bit pregnant, especially with the 4th kid. That happens early. And the CEO, congratulated me on the pregnancy. And I said, thank you very much. Just so you know, I don't mind, because I've lived in Europe, but that is the kind of thing you should not actually ever say to a woman in the U.S. This idea that, you're commenting on the fact that they're pregnant. I've heard some colleagues say, you never congratulate them until you see a picture of a baby. Yep. But I mean, obviously that's a bit extreme. And if you know someone well, it's different. But I was like, listen, let me just tell you, from what I understand in the US, like commenting on women's bodies in a work context generally is taboo. And he's like, no, but I mean, my wife was pregnant. I'm like, no, it's fine. Don't worry. I'm not offended. I'm just giving you a little tip that might not serve you well, like in all business contexts. So it was pretty funny.
No guy ever won that conversation. You're better off just saying hello. That's for sure. Yeah, I mean, it's been an interesting ride knowing you both for so long and seeing you develop. Because Katie, I knew you before you were married, if I remember right. We've known each other back in the days. I always wanted to ask you guys one last thing, and then I'll let you go. Did you guys get hired together at Medtronic after Penn, or was it just a coincidence? Like, were you guys a package deal? Like, how did that all work out?
We
kind of.
So we met in business school, so we're business school classmates. We both happened to intern at Medtronic over the summer, so that was
like not even fair because I'm the one who hooked you up with the open position for the internship. But
well, let's pick up Aaron, turn it down.
Yeah, anyway.
It's discussion.
Subject to debate.
It was largely independent. And then we just thought it would be a really good idea to work at the same company together after graduation.
Yeah, not exactly. No, I mean, it's funny. From the moment of our internship where we were dating and not engaged or married or anything through till when I left Medtronic, which was a great time. I loved Medtronic. There was always complexity around the fact that we were a couple. Because I just think companies don't really know what to do about that, and their instincts are bad, I would say. So, like, we just didn't fit the HR mold, right? Like, even when we were summer interns, we had been dating for a long time. We wanted to share an apartment, and, like, there was some rubric where they wanted to charge you a certain rate if you had, a roommate, and then a different rate if you had a one bedroom to yourself. And we said, well, that's great. Actually, we're going to save you money and us money. We want a one bedroom. And we, want the cheaper rate, and it's like their heads exploded. Yeah. They didn't know what to do. So we've been like messing up Medtronic HR policies from the minute they laid eyes on us. But I mean, ultimately, it required just a lot of good communication and coordination. And so we did manage to do this rotational program where we rotated from Minneapolis headquarters to Swiss headquarters together at the same time and finding roles at the same time. And that's sort of a trend that's continued where we've managed to coordinate all of our career transitions between two jobs that are effectively at similar and equal levels, which is not always how that works. Usually companies are used to dealing with a trailing spouse, and that just wasn't us. So I think we've always been a little bit of a head scratcher for the HR folks, but it is actually easier now that we don't work at the same company, ironically, than it was when we did.
Yeah, look, they're still in business, and you guys have a great marriage and 4 beautiful kids, so I think everybody managed to do just fine. I've always enjoyed the fact that you guys take turns and look out for each other, and when someone has an opportunity, it's their opportunity. Not every couple I've worked with is as supportive. It's been a pleasure getting to know you, and certainly a pleasure having you on here. Are there any stories or things that I've missed?
I mean, the only thing I would say on that last point is I think you're giving us, more credit for being nice than we are. I would put it more in the context of saying, like, when we both, when we've both been looking at opportunities, sometimes the tone is more like, hey, whoever finds the better thing first is the winner. So, like, game on. But no, realistically, we've been very lucky in that we've managed to navigate each of our transitions as a family joint discussion, even from before we were engaged. And so that's a trend that's continued basically from when we were doing summer internship choosing in business school through till now, which is 15 years later. So far so good on that.
No, it's been great. Thanks so much for taking some time to let everybody get to know you as well as I know you. I thank you for making this something special. This is my second time doing this, so thanks so much for all of this. Just keep doing what you're doing, and I'll certainly be talking to you guys soon.
Thanks, Matt.
Take care.
You bet. So thanks for joining the Family Business with Matt Kaufman and my guests Katie Elias and Motty Klots. Where family is what binds us. Thanks so much for participating.